Hi guys, welcome to this presentation of Fortinet AWS integration. This is Cornelius speaking from Fortinet Australia, part of the SE team. The purpose of this presentation is to do a walkthrough and give you a practical example how you can install our FortiGate devices within the Amazon Web Services environment. There's a couple of key features that you can familiarize yourself around. For instance, VPC, what does it stand for, how does it work, and just how to use Route 53, the benefits of those things. So I'm just going to run through a practical example. If you're very new to it, it's very good, but I'm going to give you a practical example on how you might deploy our services within the environment, including high availability and load balancing. So if we look at the integration component, the first thing that we'll talk about, the first thing is core protection, the advanced protection, and our global intelligence and services that's secured by our FortiGuard. So the biggest benefits there is the mobile security, the security services that you get, and that includes your app control, your antivirus, your RPS, web app, web filtering, anti-spam. There's other things like your IP reputation that's also included in there. If you're looking at the Fortinet virtual appliances, from the product aspect, if we're looking at the VMware component, it is the FortiGate VMX, the FortiWeb, the FortiADC, the FortiMail, the Authenticator, the Manager, the Analyzer, and also the Sandbox. With the focus purely on AWS for the purpose of this presentation, we're going to focus on the FortiGate, the FortiWeb, the FortiManager, and the FortiAnalyzer. Also, the purpose of this presentation is not to show you how the components work, but more how you can integrate that into the AWS environment. If you want more information on how to work on a specific product, please let us know and we can definitely give you more information around that. So just brief, it's a very wide range of cloud security appliances options that we've got in Amazon AWS. We always continuously to work to grow on that ranges as well. But the biggest thing is that we want to secure your workload. So it includes things such as your application control, your web filtering, your web application security, your IDS, RPS, your IP reputation, anti-spam, antivirus, database security, your DLP, VPN security, and also threat management. A very big thing, and you will see this graph in a couple of, or this diagram in a couple of presentations if you look at AWS within Fortinet's portfolio. The biggest thing is that we can provide our next generation firewalling with IPS antivirus, and you can also use the FortiManager to synchronize configurations and push policy and make changes. And what you can do is you can put the two firewalls down, so Fortinet firewalls down into different availability zones. Just important to know that the configuration might be in sync, but the sessions are not in sync. But you can definitely use the manager to configure and push policy and changes. We'll go into more detail in that in the next couple of slides. Something that's definitely worth noting as well is that you can use Amazon Web Services where you can install certain features or certain devices within the AWS environment, such as your manager or your analyzer, and you still can connect and communicate that via the public internet to your physical data centers. You can also have a multi-site hybrid cloud environment where you can have certain environments, even different environments within the different VPCs. You can have your headquarters and you can have a virtual environment in different locations, and you can have a full mesh where you can create IPsec connectivity to the different environments. You can send your logs from your physical headquarters, that might be physical environment, to Amazon Cloud Services. So it's just a single pane of glass management across the hybrid cloud. So again, it's whether it's running on VM or Amazon Web Services, via the internet. You can have internal data center as a boundary. We can have our centralized management systems. And again, you can use that across a hybrid cloud environment. A very good point from the FortiAnalyzer is whether it's a VM environment or a physical environment, you can send your logs to the analyzer that might be in a VM or in AWS, and you can still have the same features and functionality on both the VM as what you would have on a physical appliance. And what you're looking at is your aggregate logging. You're looking for your centralized reporting. You're looking for your analysis and event correlation. And also, it's a very nice scalable solution. Again, whether it's hardware and VM versions that are available, you can look at the collect and analyze modes for large deployments, high performance and log per second processing, and also a good point is that it supports for internal and external SQL databases. If we're looking at something new on the FortiAnalyzer, it's just very nice from the bubble charts. where, as an example, you might move your mouse over one of these key points and it will give you more information. For instance, in this case, it will tell you the applications, the sessions that's been blocked or allowed. It can give you the categories based on risks, the bytes sent and received as well. So it's a very nice view that you've got to see what's happening in your environment using the FortiView in the FortiAnalyzer. Just some nice reports that you will have as well, very granular reports where it can tell you the bytes that's been sent per day. You can look at the top destinations, allowed websites as an example, and very nice, it can give you a breakdown of the top 5 applications by bandwidth. So it's a very nice view that you can have on what's happening within your environment. Now, a big thing again that we're talking about is the global intelligence and control, which will give you a single pane of glass. We can have one place where you can log on to view what's happening in your security infrastructure. This is something I've done in my AWS environment. So what we've done as an example is we've allocated a couple of elastic IP addresses from AWS. Just bear in mind that by default you will be able to allocate yourself 5 elastic IP addresses. If you need more IPs, you just need to speak to the Amazon team, and I believe that they will be able to accommodate you with that requirement. So what we've done is this, in an example, a standalone environment where we have one public subnet, one private subnet. You put a firewall in the environment where you want to protect your Windows servers. In here, as an example, I've just created one Windows server on the EC2 instances. But also in that environment, I've created an analyzer and a manager just to showcase that we can do it and how it would work. As a basic high availability environment, again, you just create a second public subnet. You can have another private subnet, and again, you can put your Windows system in there. And what you would use is you would use your FortiManager to synchronize the configurations and also to do policy checks and push the policy configurations. So if you look at the practical example for the FortiWeb, what you can do is to create another private subnet where you want to push specific web services in here. So in this private subnet, you can have non-web applications that you might want to host. You can still have it within this private subnet and have another subnet for web applications that you want to manage. In that case, you want to put a FortiWeb in that can act between this private subnet over here and the new private subnet for your Windows, or not necessarily Windows service, but for your web applications that you want to protect. Again, you can do it in a high availability environment. You don't need to have 2 analyzers in your environment. I've just showed you a couple of things as an example of what can be done, but you can have a FortiAnalyzer in just one subnet. The biggest thing is to make sure that you will be able to manage both firewalls in case something does go wrong within the one environment. But in this case, I've got 2 firewalls, 2 AWS and 2 FortiWeb AWS devices, and your Windows service over here. You can go one step further and give you a practical example of the HA environment with the Elastic Load Balancer, and that is where you can have your FortiWeb that can talk to the AWS Elastic Load Balancer that can load balance between any of the instances on your web applications that you might have. There is also the opportunity that you can actually use the FortiWeb itself as the load balancer between the 2 instances. So that is also an option that you can consider to do. So a practical example using it. The first thing you want to do is, if you're new to AWS, is you can just go and create yourself an account, register an account. It will go through the important stuff of just contact information, payment information. It will give you some pricing information. Once you've set that up, you can go into a couple of options. The first thing you want to go to is your VPC configuration, and you can go to your wizard and then your VPC public and private subnets. This is a very quick and easy way where AWS will actually do a lot of the work for you, in the sense of creating the netting for you, and it's easy to allocate what's going to be private and public facing. So just go and select yes. So the first thing we want to do is create the public subnet and then the private subnet, and we'll continue with that in a bit more detail. So we know what we want to do there. Click select. So what you will see the screen once you connect it with the VPC public and private subnets. Just go and give it a VPC name. In this case, we went and we called it FortiVPC. The public subnet, you want to go and configure the availability zone. In this case, we just went with US East 1A. I've just made it just call it public subnet in capital letters. The purpose for this is just to show you where the name reflects in the configuration later on. You can go and allocate that also, the next availability zone to be also in East 1A, and give that a private subnet. As the name again, just in capital letters. In there you can just leave it as small. We don't need to pair any keys right now. You can configure the S3 subnets for like storage if you want to. Right now we're just going to say none. For the purpose of this practical example, I'm not going to include that right now. And enable DNS host names, we're just going to select yes, and then please create the VPC. You'll see once it's been created, you will get a notification to say that it has been successfully created. Click on OK, and the next thing we want to go and look at is going to be at the subnets. So you can see here before we go, there's VPC, the name's been configured. So let's go to subnets. You can see the private subnet and the public subnet that has been configured. A very good practice is just to go and label all of the new subnets that you might need. So create subnets, label it that you want to do. In this case, we're going to go and create a public subnet number 2, which is going to be for our high availability there as an example. Just make sure you select the correct VPC, and in this case we can use a second availability zone, and we will allocate the CID R block. And we will go and say yes, please create. So a good thing that we're going to do now quickly, a good practice, is just go and configure all the public networks that you need. Configure the right name tags, because it might become a little bit complicated as your environment grow. So just make sure you've got your name standards correct for your own references going forward. So configure all of those subnets, click create. Once you've created all the required subnets, you can just make sure it's all there, make sure everything is available. Just double check you've got your right blocks configured in the right availability zones, just as a good reference. So the next thing is going to be to configure the EC2. So go back to your console page, click on the EC2, and we want to look at creating the new instances. Click on launch instance, and you want to go to the AWS Marketplace. And once you've clicked there, just click in the search option there, click Fortinet, and hit enter, and it will show you all the Fortinet products that we've got available. So in this case, we're going to use the Fortinet bring your own license, just to bring up the 2 boxes. Just leave that and hit continue. We want to leave this instance type as default. You can go and change it based on your environment and requirements. So the next thing you need to do is just make sure that you select the correct network. You want that to be in your 40 VPC that we've just created. Make sure that you've selected the correct subnet. In this case, we are happy with what's been selected because it's the public facing subnet. We don't want to auto-assign public IP addresses. We will go and do it ourselves. And just scroll down under the network interfaces, and under Ethernet 0 there is where we're going to go and configure the public facing interface 10.0.0.5. It's an important note as well to know is if you look at the option there for a secondary IP address, that is where you can configure secondary IP addresses that you might want to use to configure for static NAT or virtual IP addresses as an example. You would then configure the elastic IPs and point that to the secondary IPs that's been configured in this AWS environment. You will then take those secondary IPs that's been configured and configure that to the internal network for any VIP static NAT requirements. I'll give you a practical example a bit later on as well. So add device will be for the inside network. Make sure you select the correct subnet, and again just allocate the IP address that's been allocated as per the diagram. We will use 10.0.1.5, and you can click on next to go and add storage. In this case, we're just going to make it a little bit bigger and say 60 gig, and you want to go and tag the instances. Again, it's good to have the names there as references. Make sure it's there for your own reference to understand what has been configured where, and you can just go and review what you've configured. The next thing is the security groups. It is good to have it in place. For the purpose of testing, we're just going to create a new one and say FortiGate test any, and we're just going to allow all traffic. Again, in your production environment, you might want to limit it and only allow the correct traffic to go to your device. Review and launch, and we'll go on to the next step. An important thing here to remember as well is that if you go and you configure your firewall, And under the select an existing key pair or create a new key pair, we're going to select the proceed without a key pair. And we'll show you in detail how to log on with the FortiGate for the very first time using the instance ID as the password when you log onto the device. So we'll just proceed, we acknowledge it, and we're going to go and launch the instance. And while that's busy running in the background, we can go and look at the elastic IP addresses, and we're going to associate the public IP addresses while that instance is being loaded. So we just want to say associate that to the outside IP address, and we can ping it perfectly. So we're very happy with that. I'm just going to go and HTTPS to it, make sure that we can actually log on to it, and off we go. So we know that's working. So then we want to look at the route for the private subnets, make sure the routing is working correctly. An important thing to do here as well is just make sure that you've labeled the interfaces. It's going to make a big difference going forward if you want to route things to the correct interfaces. As an example, I'll configure, I'll give it a name here, and what I'll do is I'll copy the wrong interface just to show you the how important it is to use the right interface names as well, and just from a practical example where it can become quite useful to reference that. As an example, if I'm going to go back to my routing table here, and in my just make sure it's under VPC, you can go to your routing tables. And as an example, let's say I've selected the wrong interface, and if I didn't have the right name, just the how difficult your life can become if you don't reference your routing to the correct interfaces. As an example, we want to say a default route must now point to, and if I selected the wrong interface, as an example, you can see it's referenced to the public interface. We want it to be referenced into the private interface. So what we're going to do is we're just going to copy the correct network interface and make sure it's pointing to the inside of the network. And now if you go back and copy the right interface, you can actually see it's going to show you that it's the private network. So it's just going to make your life a little bit easier. And make sure that you configure the correct interfaces. Click on save and make sure that's active. Under subnet associations, edit, and make sure you select the correct subnet that will be associated for routing to that firewall interface. Good thing to do as well under network interfaces, under the private network, you want to right click on there and you want to go and change the source destination check. It's some very good security features that Amazon did build into the environment, where only networks that's in the private subnet will be able to talk to that subnet. It comes a little bit handy, if from a security aspect, but because we can connect to that environment from the public internet, you want to have that disabled. So you are going to have IPs that might be communicating to that instance that's not part of the same initially configured subnet IP addresses. So we can see that's working. That's all up and running. So you want to copy the instance ID. So that will be the initial password. Again, once you've logged on, and it will ask you to load the license. So we're just going to go and select the license that we've got. But the first thing I would recommend you to do once that's been configured is just make sure that you change the password. So we've got the first firewall set up over there. Let's go and change the password, confirm password change, and let's go and configure the secondary firewall. So it's the basic same steps that we've done right now with a couple of small changes. But again, bring your own license. The key here is to configure the new subnet that we've configured, and make sure it's in the new zone. And the same thing, go and configure the IP addresses, the public, private IP addresses. Make sure you collect the correct instance IDs there that you need. In this case, we're going to go and select the same existing security group that we've configured before, and just select that and review and launch. And the same thing, just make sure that you proceed without any key and hit launch. Then just put the new names in there for references. It's going to make your life easier again for troubleshooting going forward. And while that's being loaded, it's going to configure the elastic IP addresses. So we're just going to associate that. And so you can either go on the instance or you can go based on network interfaces. I would recommend looking at the network interfaces. It's just going to make it a bit simpler to double check and make sure that you could allocate that private IP to the correct interface for that instance. I'm just going to associate that. And there we go. You can make sure that's up and running. So again, we can HTTPS to the admin page and make sure it's working. Then again, the same thing, just configure the new route for the private subnet on your secondary, for the secondary unit. So again, you want to click on just edit it. So you'll see there's no default route, so we're going to just go and point the default route to the correct interface. And again, it's the private interface for the secondary firewall, and we just clicked on save. And again, subnet associations, make sure that you can select the correct subnet for the environment, and you can hit save. And the same thing again, guys, network interfaces, change the source destination check, leave it disabled and save. Otherwise, your network traffic will not work to that environment from the internet. So we can see that that environment is running. Let's log on with our instance ID and we can load the license key. So again, once the license key has been loaded, it will reboot the firewall. Just go and change the password. So similar steps what we've done on the configuring the very first firewall. So a couple of things, just execute update now. That's just to make sure that the license key, the licenses and those things are renewed and make sure it's activated. And also because it's a virtual box, just go and execute format lock disk to make sure that you can get the locks in your virtual environment. The next thing would be to add the FortiAnalyzer and the manager to the environment. This is a little bit easier than adding the firewalls because it's only one interface. Go to the AWS Marketplace, type in Fortinet, and you will look for the FortiAnalyzer and just click on select. By default, you will get, I think it's 15 days free trial on that, so feel free to go and add it in your environment to see what it's like. And for any licenses, please contact us and we can definitely help you. So again, you can just go and select an existing group, proceed without any key pair, and log onto the box. So once you've logged on there, you want to go and create a virtual IP address to your newly configured analyzer and manager. So what you want to do, if you haven't configured the secondary addresses yet, you will go to the public interface, manage private IP addresses, and here's where you can configure the secondary addresses that you will reference as VIP IP addresses to the trusted, so-called trusted environment. So let's say, for instance, the FortiAnalyzer, we can put that on our port 1 or untrusted interface. In this case, we will reference the 10.0.0.6 as the secondary address within that public VPC environment, and we will map that to our analyzer IP address to the inside network 10.0.1.200, and we hit on OK. Just to connect to it and do a showcase and show you guys how the analyzer manager would work in this environment. So all traffic to HTTP and HTTPS for that. Again, you would create associate an elastic IP address to the newly VIP address that you've configured so that you can connect to the analyzer from the internet. So when you load this box for the first time, it will be on version 5.2. And I'll show you guys how to upgrade this box as well. So you literally just click on the firmware there, click on update, select the new file, click OK. It will load the image and it will reboot the analyzer. So while that's working, we can go into the manager. Again, allocate a new address, associate the addresses. And make sure we select that to the new address, which is 10.0.0.7, and we will allocate that for the manager. And again, just configure the VIP and the policies. So once you've got the policies configured, you will be able to log onto the box, and you will see, as an example, here is the Forti Analyzer, and you can see it's the new version by just looking at the logon prompt. So again, this is just the manager, so we can see the manager is also running on 5.2.2. So we're just going to log on, update, and it's the same thing. Just go and update, load the new code. It will reboot and come up with the login prompt with the new version. So adding FortiWeb into the environment while that is being loaded. Again, very easy. Just go and select the subnet. So this is very similar to the firewall, where you go and configure two interfaces. So just make sure you select the correct interfaces and make sure that you configure the two interfaces in the correct subnets. An important thing here to remember is that in this case we will proceed creating a new key, and we'll just give it a key name, and we will download the key pair, and you can go then and launch the instance. Okay. So in that case, we've got the web filtering up and running. I'm just going to go and tell it into the box. Make sure I can connect to the box, and that's all working. Make sure you need to use the instance ID to log on to it, and that's all good on the FortiWeb. If you go back to the device manager, what we can do there is just go and add device. You want to go and put the IP address in there of the primary firewall. Just add the serial number and the device name. In this case, I just left it the same, and you can click on next to discover it. It will tell you if the device has been successfully added, or if there's failures. It will tell you. It will tell you the failures. Please make sure that everything is working to continue with the box. Again, under the firewall, go into the log settings. Make sure you can connect to the device manager as well, or to the analyzer. So again, just go and add the correct IP addresses. It will tell you if the device has been successfully added. Click on finish, and we can go and add the secondary box as well. So once it's there, it will tell you that the box has been synchronized. And if we get to log out and back in, it will tell us, hold on a second, the box is now being used by the manager. So within the manager, you can go and configure IPv4 policies. In this example, I just went like any source address is all. Make sure you configure the correct installation targets where you want to move the policies to. And if we're going to go and say install the policy, it will tell you, you've got the options to create revision. If you click on next, it will tell you where you want to push the policies to. If you say next, it will give you a nice little window of where it is in the installation wizard. A key point here is that you can preview the configurations. So before you want to submit it, you can actually see what it might do and make sure that you are happy with the requirements before you can hit deploy. So once you're happy with the manager, you can go to the analyzer. You can go to device manager, and you can go and look at the devices that's been added there. You can see one is sending the logs in real time, another one is read. So what I've done on the configurations, it was literally one is sending it real time, another one I said please only send the logs every day. Run his report, double click on the IP's report, and we'll give you a nice view on what happens. Again, HTML, PDF, XML, or CSV format. We can hit HTML, and you can see the IPS report. It shows you the intrusion timelines. You can see things such as the severity. You can see the attack victim. You can see the source. You can also double click on the link provided, then it will tell you what vulnerability it is, and also specific references that you can go and reference that specific vulnerability. You can go back, for instance, click on all reports, and let's, as an example, go and look at a security analysis. Hit on run report, double click on the folder, and again it will show you It will show you the status of the report as well. So if you're trying to run a report, you can see how long it is in creating the report. Once you've done that, click on HTML, and it will give you information such as the bandwidth of the applications, the number of sessions that's been utilized, top applications by sessions. So it will give you a nice comprehensive report where you can have a proper view on what's happening within your environment, where you can look at the security analysis and give it back to management. So just to summarize what we've been talking about, we've showed you how to use, or how you can potentially use, our FortiGate environment within the AWS and also have it as a high availability environment. What you want to do is you want to utilize Amazon's Route 53 for DNS redundancy. So in Route 53, you can go and create a primary path to, let's say, for instance, something happening here to the private network 1, and you can also create something that will connect to your private subnet 2 as a secondary option. And again, if you look at the advanced option, you can go and configure the FortiGates with the FortiWeb in this type of scenario. We can still point it to an elastic load balancer within the AWS environment, or again, you can also use the FortiWeb itself as a load balancer to your specific web services that can be in different instances. So guys, thank you very much for joining the session. Please send me an email at cmarie@fortinet.com if you have any questions relating to AWS and Fortinet, and I'll do my best to answer your questions as soon as practically possible. Thank you.